On today's episode of the franchise, June 14th, the Denver Nuggets are NBA champions. We're going to recap the NBA Finals Series. What are the Heat going to do this offseason? Where do the Nuggets go? And where does Jokic rank all time amongst NBA centers with his current resume, which is a very impressive resume, to say the least, for Nikola Jokic, as well as there is a bunch of NBA trade rumors circulating right now. The rumor mill is hot right now in the NBA. We're going to talk about this Stefon Diggs thing going on in Buffalo, as well as the AL MVP race, buyers and sellers in the MLB, as well as the Oakland A's reverse boycott. Before we get into the episode, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. It's where you can watch or listen to the franchise. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok in the description of the episode. All right, let's start here. The Denver Nuggets winning the 2023 NBA championship. They won 5 games as predicted and kind of as expected, in my opinion. They won this game 94-89. Looking at the box score real quick, Jimmy Butler ended with 21 points. He shot 2 of 5 from 3, 5 of 18 from the field. Bam had 20 and 12. Miami shot horrible from deep in this game, 25% from 3. Jokic with a 28-point, 16 rebound performance. Jamal Murray with 14 points. Michael Porter Jr. had the best game of this series for him personally, especially after the last 2 or 3 games having horrible shooting performances. He comes out with 16 points, 13 rebounds, 7 for 17 from the field. He had bit a very big time 3-point shot down the stretch in the fourth quarter. Really, the only important piece from this game 5 is the fourth quarter, because the first 3 quarters don't really matter. I mean, the only thing to say about the first 3 quarters was that was some of the worst officiating to start a game that's ever been seen. It was a very physical first and second quarter. A lot of missed foul calls, a lot of just no calls, a lot of bad calls too. Not just even in the first half. I mean, in particular, the first and second quarter were horribly called. But even down the stretch in the fourth quarter, Jimmy Butler gets called for a foul on the, shooting in the corner on a 3-point shot. Aaron Gordon and another defender right there with him. They jump up, no contact. They don't even touch him, and he gets called for a foul. They even review it, and it's still a foul. So the officiating in this game was horrible, but that's no reason. That didn't affect the outcome of the game. Denver was still going to win no matter what, in my opinion, although Miami made it very close in the fourth quarter. Jimmy Butler, with the way he started this game, he was horrible. The first 3 quarters of this game, he was easily the worst player on the floor, and especially from a guy that is the most important player to this Heat team and their potential success. Jimmy Butler was horrible. When it comes to the fourth quarter, Jimmy Butler really turned it on. He had 2 big-time 3-point shots. He had some free throws. He was very, very good down the stretch in the fourth quarter. Obviously, was not able to get the job done. Had a few horrible 3-point shot attempts. He took some bad looks towards the end of the game, like the final minute of the game. Jimmy Butler took some very bad shot attempts, and I think that's just him forcing up shots because he had been so efficient throughout the earlier part of that fourth quarter. A few minutes prior, Jimmy Butler was making big-time 3-pointers, free throws. He was cooking on the offensive end, to say the least. But the Nuggets win this series in 5. That was expected. Look, Denver shot the ball horrible to start this game. Miami looked like they were potentially about to force game 6 with the way they had started out the game and the way that Denver started out the game. Denver, they missed 20 of their first 22 3-point shots, and they missed 7 of their first 13 free throws. So they were not able to hit shots. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Denver in 5, and Nikola Jokic wins Finals MVP, and he's the first player in NBA history to lead the league in points, rebounds, and assists in a single postseason run. He led the league in points, rebounds, and assists this playoff run, which is just a wild stat. I mean, he is clearly the most dominant player and easily the best player in the NBA. So where does Nikola Jokic rank all time? in terms of centers. I'm not going to look at an all-time list, all positions, because he'd be a lot lower on the list. I mean, not super, super low. But in terms of all-time centers, where does Jokic rank? I mean, he's definitely a top 10 center of all time, and I would argue he's borderline top 5. I have him at number 6, and there's the 5 guys in front of him for me. Number 1 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? 19-time All-Star, a 6-time NBA champ, and a 6-time MVP, 2-time Final MVP. He's the second leading scorer in NBA history, and in my opinion, he's the 3rd best player of all time. I think it's a no-brainer that Kareem is the number 1 center of all time. And then the number 2 is another no-brainer, and that's Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal, 15-time All-Star, 4-time champion, 14-time All-NBA, a 3-time Finals MVP, a 3-time All-Star Game MVP. No regular season MVPs for Shaq, but he is arguably the most dominant player, physically dominant player in NBA history. And he easily, in my opinion, is the 2nd best center of all time. Now 3, 4, and 5, you could argue they're interchangeable. Someone could argue that Jokic is better than these guys. I don't think so based off his current resume, but who knows 5, 6 years down the line. But number 3 is Wilt for me, 13-time All-Star, 7-time scoring champ, 2 NBA championships, a 4-time MVP. He averaged 30 points and 22 rebounds per game in his career. Now, obviously, those are very inflated numbers. You look at the time he played early in the NBA. Obviously, has the most points scored in a single game, 100 points. I think Wilt Chamberlain, despite the time he played in, is still an undisputed all-time great. Number 4 is Hakeem Olajuwon. This one, I feel like Hakeem doesn't get mentioned a lot in terms of all-time big men, all-time centers lists. Arguably, one of the greatest defensive big men of all time. A 9-time All-Defensive team, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 12-time All-NBA team, 12-time All-Star, and a 2-time NBA champion on those Houston Rockets teams in the 90s. He's such a dominant player, and I feel like he's very underrated when you talk about all-time centers. So he's number 4. And then number 5, right above of Nikola Jokic, is going to be Bill Russell, the legend, 11-time champion. That's the most of any player in history, a 5-time MVP, 11-time All-NBA, and a 12-time All-Star. And then number 6 would be Nikola Jokic. And his current resume is very, very nice. A 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA, 2-time MVP, and a 1-time champ, 1-time Final MVP. I think if Jokic plays another 10 years of his career and at this level, you're still looking at him being potentially a 15-time All-Star or at least a 10-time All-Star, potentially 10-time All-NBA. He definitely is capable of winning a few more MVP awards. And with the way the Nuggets and the rest of the current NBA are shaped out, the Nuggets are the favorites to repeat as champions next season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he wins another championship or 2 to add to his resume. So Jokic right now is 6th best center of all time, in my opinion, but that is definitely capable of changing because of where he is at currently in his career. If he was to call it quits right now, he is a Hall of Famer. But which is expected, if he plays 10 more seasons and plays 10 more seasons of greatness, I could find him. You could really find him moving up into the top 3. I don't think he's ever going to pass Shaquille O'Neal or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but he could definitely pass a guy like Wilt Chamberlain, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Bill Russell. Although he's more of an offensive, he's a scorer, he's a passer. He's not involved on the defensive end like Hakeem, like Wilt Chamberlain, like Shaq, like Bill Russell. But Jokic right now is easily the 6th best center of all time. Another thing to mention with this Nuggets finals run is the conversation that the Nuggets had the easiest path or weak path to the NBA championship this season. And when you look at the teams they played, you could definitely understand why someone would say that. All right, first round, 8th seed Minnesota Timberwolves. Then they play the 4-seeded Suns, the 7th-seeded Lakers, and the 8th-seeded Heat. But the seeds are not reflective of a few things. First of all, the Nuggets don't get to pick what team they play each round. They didn't get to choose the Timberwolves or the Suns or the Lakers or the Heat. They didn't get to pick what team they were going to play. They had to deal with the cards that were dealt. They had to play against what was dealt to them. They had to play these teams. They didn't get to pick the 8th seed, the 7th seed, and the 8th seed. But the seedings are not reflective of what these teams did during this postseason. The Lakers were the second best team by record post trade deadline and they ended as the 7th seed. They were the 13th seed at one point during the NBA season. They completely turned their season around at the trade deadline, which is less than halfway through the season. And then they're capable of making it to the NBA playoffs, become the 7th seed, and make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. So the Lakers were easily the second best team in the Western Conference at the point they played the Nuggets, regardless of seed. It doesn't matter if they were the 7th seed. They were better than every other team in the Western Conference besides the Denver Nuggets. The Miami Heat, they went on an incredible run. They upsetted the 1-seeded Bucks. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Celtics. Their guys got hot at the right time, and they were incredible throughout this postseason run. The Suns, although they were the 4th seed, they had Kevin Durant and they had Devin Booker along with Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. And then the 8th-seeded Timberwolves, I mean, when you're the 1 seed, you're going to end up playing the 8th seed. So there's no real argument there. The fact that we continue to try to diminish these NBA championships, and we only seem to do it in the NBA. It's not like you're doing it in the NFL. Oh, look who Patrick Mahomes played in the playoffs last season, or look who Tom Brady played in the 2014 NFL playoffs, or something like that. It's only in the NBA is it that we diminish the value of these championships. And the Nuggets, they had to deal with what they played. They didn't get to pick the 8th seed and the 7th seed and the 8th seed every single time. Now, the only rings in NBA history that do not count are Kevin Durant's 2 rings with the Warriors. Those are the only rings that are absolutely worthless. But every single other championship is about as valuable as it gets in terms of the team that won it. So the Nuggets, NBA champions, definitely the favorites to repeat and open up the season as the favorites next season. But a team not named the Nuggets, if I was to pick one team that's going to be the champion as of right now, before the draft, before the offseason, before free agency, before we see what teams load up on and what players get traded and who signs where, I think there's a few teams that are contenders. The Celtics, the Bucks, the New York Knicks, the Heat, the Lakers, Clippers, Suns, Kings, Warriors, and the Memphis Grizzlies. Of those teams, besides the Denver Nuggets, which one do I think has the best opportunity to win the NBA championship next season? I think it's the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, who knows what they're going to do this offseason? Chris Middleton, free agent. Do they bring him back or do they move on from him? Drew Holiday potentially could be on the move. There's also some big-time players that they could acquire this offseason via trade, via free agency. They have a new head coach, but they still have Giannis, who is, in my opinion, the second best player in the game, which is going to elevate them to the status of being able to compete for a championship. Now, there's a lot of players this offseason, and right now, there's a lot of rumors circulating about a bunch of guys potentially on the trade block. And one of them is Bradley Beal. And this has been a long time coming. Bradley Beal has been in trade rumors for at least 3 or 4 years now with his time in Washington with the Wizards. We have been creating rumors and creating mock trades for years, trying to get Bradley Beal out of Washington, out of the Wizards. And finally today, it seems that they are trying to be searching. They're going to try and search for a trade this offseason to get Bradley Beal out of Washington. And this is the right thing for the Wizards. The Wizards have been stuck in this middle tier, bottom tier team throughout Bradley Beal's whole career. I mean, earlier on when they had Beal and John Wall, they were a pretty solid team, but I don't think they ever made it past the first or second round of the playoffs. And they've been holding on to Bradley Beal for years now. I've been improving the roster, and this is just not a team that is able to go out there and compete for a championship. So they look to reset, to rebuild this team. But unfortunately for them, Bradley Beal is at the lowest value he's ever been at in his entire career. If they were to trade Bradley Beal 2 years ago, they'd be getting the most value they could have ever gotten for Bradley Beal. But Bradley Beal's trade value is about as low as it can possibly possibly be, and that has nothing to do with his play. All right, 23 points per game, five and a half assists, shoots 50% from the field, 36% from three, 84% from the line. And the problem with Bradley Beal is going to be two things. It's going to be his contract, his 5-year, $250 million Supermax contract extension he signed last offseason, which per year will pay him $46 million next year, $50 million, $53 million, and then a $57 million player option, which you can pretty much pencil in that he will be accepting that because there's no way he's going to turn down a $57 million paycheck. And then the second thing is he has a no trade clause. For some reason, last year when he signs that Supermax extension, the Wizards decide to give him a no trade clause in his contract, which completely limits what they can do and what value they can get for Bradley Beal in a potential trade. And last season, when he signed this Supermax with this no trade clause, you could see the writing is on the wall for when Bradley Beal decides to get traded, when he decides to request a trade, or the Wizards decide to move on from him. This is going to be something that comes back and bites them because they do not have the leverage in a Bradley Beal trade. It is all on Bradley Beal. Now they're going to try and come together and find locations for him to go. I think Miami, the Heat, is really the number one. The Heat are in need of another scorer alongside Jimmy Butler and Bam to help carry this team to a championship. And they have the salaries to match up. Tyler Hero, his rookie extension is kicking in, and they definitely are capable of flipping Bradley Beal for Tyler Hero, some first-round picks, and some other young players on this Heat squad. But Bradley Beal could also say he wants to be traded to a team. For example, he could say he only wants to be traded to the Lakers, and if he's not traded to the Lakers, he's going to hold out. He's going to sit out. He's not going to play. And then also with the no trade clause, he can decline any trade. If the Lakers and the Wizards agree to a deal that sends LeBron and AD to the Wizards for Bradley Beal, he can decline that. He can basically force any trade between two teams. If the Wizards want to trade him to the Lakers because that's where he wants to go, and he could force them to basically sign and trade D'Angelo Russell for Bradley Beal, and you could basically keep the rest of the Lakers roster intact. So first of all, the Wizards giving out this no trade clause last season was probably one of the dumbest decisions their franchise has ever made, because now they're getting no value back for Bradley Beal, along with the fact that he's making $250 million over the next 4 years, which is going to really turn some teams off. But at the same time, his value being so low as it is, there's going to be a plethora of teams, in my opinion, they're going to go out there and try to get Bradley Beal, and a lot of contending teams. I said the Heat. I think the Knicks are going to be out there. They have a lot of assets, draft picks, young players, movable contracts. The Knicks are a team that makes sense for Bradley Beal. The Portland Trailblazers as well. They are trying to find a guy to pair next to Damian Lillard, moving off of that 3rd overall pick and build a contender with Damian Lillard. Now, the 3rd overall pick for Bradley Beal is a lot of value. I think that is a lopsided trade, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility for Portland to just say, here's the 3rd overall pick, Anthony Simons, and another contract to make the money work for Bradley Beal. The Wizards would win that trade 100%, but it's definitely possible. The Thunder, they have like 20 first-round picks over the next 3 years of drafting of drafts. The Milwaukee Bucks are a team that makes sense. You could trade Drew Holiday for Bradley Beal and start a new era with Giannis, with a new head coach in this Bucks team. And then also the Lakers and the Clippers. The Clippers are an interesting team this offseason to see what they do. Over the last 5 years, with this Paul George, Kawhi Leonard experiment, they haven't made it past the Western Conference Finals. And these two guys have never, they're never on the floor. They never play more than half of the season any given year. So it wouldn't surprise me if Paul George or Kawhi Leonard potentially gets moved this offseason. And maybe Bradley Beal is one of the guys that they get moved for. That one seems to be kind of a long shot, though. And then another guy in the trade rumors is Zion Williamson, the former number 1 overall pick, one of the most hyped prospects in NBA history, potentially is on the move. A lot of teams are looking and keeping their eye out on the Zion Williamson situation in New Orleans. Now, we talked about it earlier in the week. The Pelicans want to move up, and they want to draft Scoot Henderson, the guard in the G League, arguably the second best prospect in this draft, outside of Victor Wembanyama, and then right next to Brandon Miller. So Scoot Henderson is on the top of the Pelicans board. Now, Charlotte and Portland hold the 2 and the 3 overall picks. We said it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't seem possible for either of those two teams to trade with New Orleans unless they're offering Zion Williamson. And Zion might just be available. And when you look at Zion, his availability, his contract, and the possibility of your New Orleans to reset that rookie money with Scoot Henderson for the next 4 years, it is definitely somewhat of a possibility. Now, Zion's problem with him has been his availability. He's played 29 games last season, put up 26 points per game, shot 60% from the field. But over his 5-year NBA career, he's played 114 games of a possible 214 games. He missed a full season. He hasn't played more than 61 games in an entire year. Luckily for Zion, I mean, when he is on the floor, he is one of the best players in the league. And last season with New Orleans, when they had Brandon Ingram and they had Zion Williamson playing together on the floor and they were healthy as an entire team, they were the 2 seed in the Western Conference at one point. And then Brandon Ingram goes down, and then Zion misses a bunch of time with injury, and then the Pelicans completely miss the postseason. So it is a possibility that the Pelicans move on from Zion Williamson. I don't think it will happen. I don't think it should happen. This Pelicans team has a lot of nice players. You're not moving on from Brandon Ingram, and you're not moving on from Zion Williamson. In my opinion, you can't move on from a guy that was the most hyped prospect since LeBron James. You selected him number 1 overall in the 2019 draft. You give him the Supermax rookie extension, and then you're just going to trade him because he's not available. I mean, it makes sense. If he's not available, what good does he bring to this team? If he's only going to play 29, 30 games a season, you might as well get that guy off your roster and get a young guy like Scoot Henderson, who is guaranteeing you, 60, 70 games a season. So Zion, I don't think he'll get traded. I don't think they should trade him. But then again, if they do want Scoot Henderson, that might just be the price it takes, because Charlotte is apparently asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars for the number 2 overall pick, which is very interesting because, they are seemingly going to be taking Brandon Miller, although Scoot Henderson is the better player. But the Zion rumors, I don't think that is too much there to look into. All right, moving on over to the NFL. This is another thing I don't think means much. Honestly, I don't think this means anything. And that is the Stefon Diggs, Buffalo Bills situation that has been brewing over the last 2 days. Mandatory minicamps started in the NFL, and for the Buffalo Bills in particular, Stefon Diggs was not there on Tuesday, was not present for mandatory minicamps. Head coach Sean McDermott says he's very concerned that Stefon Diggs was not there practicing with the team on Tuesday. However, Diggs was in the building. He took his physical. He talked to the GM, Brandon Bean, and then he talked to the head coach, Sean McDermott, individually, both one-on-one. Stefon Diggs' agent said he will be playing, or he will be present for the rest of minicamp. This is just a weird thing. This came out from what I saw yesterday. This was a report in the morning that Stefon Diggs wasn't at training camp or at mandatory minicamp, which is not really a shocker because there's tons of guys every single year that sit out of OTAs, optional minicamp, mandatory minicamp, training camp. There is a plethora of guys every single season that sit out of those team activities in the offseason and then ultimately come back. But usually, if those guys are sitting out, in particular of training camp or mandatory minicamp, those are guys that are wanting a new contract. But Stefon Diggs signed a 4-year, $96 million extension last offseason. He has $70 million guaranteed. He has 3 years left on his deal. He's one of the highest paid receivers in the league. He's one of the highest targeted receivers in the league. So from a football standpoint, it doesn't make sense for Diggs to sit out. It doesn't seem like it is a football issue. Now, that's what the Bills said. That's what Josh Allen said. That's what the head coach said. It's not a football issue. It's something else. I think this got completely blown out of proportion. I think this is middle of the NFL offseason, nothing in the NFL to talk about. And Stefon Diggs doesn't show up to mandatory minicamp. We need to blow this story out of proportion. He ends up practicing today. He is literally practicing on Wednesday with the Bills at mandatory minicamp. So this doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. If he was looking for a new deal, then it would make sense. If he was trying to get traded, then it would make sense. But none of those things seem to be the issue. So this Stefon Diggs story of him not being at the first day of minicamp and Sean McDermott, the head coach, being very concerned, seems to just be a whole load of nothing. That's what it seems to be. All right, 3 more things here today, all baseball related. Let's start here with the Oakland A's. They had a reverse boycott yesterday. As we all know, the Oakland A's seemingly moving to Las Vegas sooner rather than later. They already bought the land. Also yesterday, Nevada approved a $380 million in public funds to build the Las Vegas ballpark for the Oakland A's. It's been a story for years now. First of all, that the Oakland Coliseum is the worst stadium in professional sports, and in particular, Major League Baseball. And then over the last 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, with how bad this Oakland A's team has been, the conversation has been now the fans of the Oakland A's don't exist, blah, blah, blah. We have to move to Vegas. There's no fans here. There's not a market for baseball here in Oakland. Let's move to Vegas where we can actually get a stadium done and there should be fans. But that's simply not the case. All right, the A's planned the reverse boycott for last night. 27,000 people packed the Coliseum. I think that is the biggest crowd they've had all season for the reverse boycott against the team, against the owner, and against Major League Baseball. Now, this is a horrible look for baseball, for the MLB, and for the A's owner, John Fisher. Now, I've talked about this when the A's were earlier this season. I think it was like a month or two ago when they announced they bought land in Vegas. I did an episode on it. You can find it here on the channel, on the podcast. But basically, the A's forced their way out of Oakland by putting out the worst product on the field. They literally have one of the worst teams ever put out on an MLB field. And okay, they have won 7 straight games. They've taken the first 2 games in a series against the Tampa Bay Rays. They're hot right now. But when you look at what they've done throughout the season and the roster that they have, this is one of the worst teams ever constructed. And they're simply not trying to win. And it's been like that for 2-3 seasons now. And it's been like that over the last 25 years of Oakland A baseball. They've simply traded guys for not because they don't want to pay them, because they don't want to sign them to extensions or whatnot. Look at the examples of Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Josh Donaldson, Sean Manaea, all of those, Marcus Semien, all of those guys with multiple years left on their contracts at very low money, traded before they have the opportunity to get an extension from the team. So the A's, I mean, they've had tons of good rosters. Just 3 or 4 years ago, they were a 97 win ball club with sold out seats at the worst stadium in sports was sold out for that Oakland A's 2019, 2018 seasons. And now seemingly with the A's not trying to win and trying to force their way to Vegas, the Oakland fans lose out because the A's owner doesn't want to pay for a stadium, doesn't want to put out a winning team, and just wants to get out of town. Now, honestly, I think the A's should stay in Oakland. I think they should build a ballpark in Oakland for the A's, because when you look at when the A's end up moving to Vegas, there's not going to be any fans there of the Oakland A's. They're not going to have any real fans in the Oakland or in the Las Vegas ballpark. It's the same thing that happened with the Raiders. When the Raiders moved from Oakland to Vegas, you look at a Raiders home game in Vegas now. When the Chiefs and the Raiders play in Las Vegas, it is a Chiefs home game. the crowd is all red, or if the Broncos are there, it's all orange. The Raiders don't have real fans in Vegas. The A's won't have real fans in Vegas. You know what team in Vegas does have real fans and does have a passionate fan base that shows up for the games is the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And why is that? Besides the success that they've had winning the Stanley Cup Finals, being a perennial playoff contender, it's because they're an expansion team. And that is exactly what Major League Baseball needs to do with the city of Las Vegas. They need to expand to Vegas, not relocate a team there, because if you relocate a team there, no one in that city is going to care. But if you give them a brand new team with no history, a brand new, clean organization, that will be how you get a fan base. That will be how you pack a stadium. I think the whole A's Las Vegas MLB situation is one of the biggest messes in Major League Baseball history. That's going to do it, though, for this episode. I'm going to end it here. We were going to talk about the AL MVP race and some buyers and sellers in the MLB, but we're going to save that for later on in the week. We'll be back another episode, most likely on either Thursday or Friday. But yeah, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Watch, listen there. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram in the description. See you guys later.